there's a feature with the Fiend, and it's called Rage.
Okay. Oh yes. What is up? Felix Lehr here for Thomann from our studios in Berlin, and with me today is a very special guest, my friend Henning Baer, who is the founder of Ground in Theory and one of the most exciting techno artists here from Berlin. And you brought some toys with you. What are we up to?
Exactly, I brought my 808 with me. And 3 different pedals, all of them playing in the bigger category, distortion. Yet do they have different approaches to what kind of distortion they produce. And yeah, I brought them because in my production in general, I really like to overdrive and to drive and distort sounds. And I'm very often on looking for new pedals, and I don't really find the videos where essentially it's an 808 or a 909 or whatever, a drum machine with the guitar pedals. And that's why I brought them here today, to kind of like give them a try in this very simple setup.
Yeah. So, what kind of differences are there in general, not just between these 3 pedals, but the different categories of distortion?
So, well, yeah, there's the general description or the general category distortion, but we have, especially here, we have a drive pedal, which is an overdrive, which is basically riding a signal pretty hot or hotter than it would normally be, and it creates a certain drive in the circuitry. And then we have the distortion, which is, I would consider it a more extreme version of the drive.
So creating more overtones, more harmonics.
Exactly. And then here's the fuzz, which potentially is the most broken.
Yeah, so it's an even extremer version of a regular distortion.
Exactly. And as far as I'm concerned, the fuzz effect resulted from broken gear. So
okay.
People tried to emulate how a broken valve amp would sound like without breaking or without using broken gear. Yeah, and I consider them as essential parts in the studio setup.
Yeah. And
yeah, I would love to showcase them one after the other with the 808, because you can turn an 808 into something perhaps even more exciting than it is already.
Yeah. So why don't we start with the dry signal first, and then maybe go at them one by one?
Yeah. All right. So this is our dry 808. We have the bass drum and the low tom playing together with the clap, which is already, it's an iconic 808 beat, right? Nothing crazy, nothing fancy. Yet it is perhaps one of the most recognizable drum sounds out there. And yeah, I would like to
start with the blues driver.
Start with the blues driver.
All right.
And you can already hear what it does to the sound. It gives it this hairiness, and especially this one, you have a little EQ where you can.
Okay. So basically, like a low pass filter. When you're on the right, you have all the high frequencies.
You can highlight a few elements of the sound itself, and we have the on the right we have the gain part, where you can actually
control the input,
control the drive by itself to an extreme which might be too extreme, right? So I would tune it in somewhere here. You have the input on the left, and you can, you have to find a certain sweet spot to find the drive you would prefer in your production. Now we're having the hi-hat, and you. I mean, if you compare it to the undriven signal, I think it's pretty significant. I mean, you have to be careful with all kinds of distortion in general in the production process because it might be too extreme. And also now imagine you have to fit in a synthesizer at this point. It can be quite difficult if you have already a signal that is so thick. But for more percussion or like rhythm track focused productions, that might be already a perfect take.
But I think especially for electronic sounds, something like distortion, even in a much more subtle way, can be very important because the electronic sounds, they're often so not complex. They are super basic, like real acoustic sounds, they are infinitely complex. So it's often to make them go through in the mix, they have to be a bit more complex, and even a very subtle kind of distortion.
Yeah, because it adds these harmonics that potentially might be missing. I mean, I'm a guy, I tend to have a bit more.
Yeah, but you always do it in a very graceful way.
Yeah.
I often hear it in Done, and which also has its kind of punk root aesthetic, but this much more subtle version.
Yeah, I mean, you can go pretty extreme on that, but I think it you know, if you in this case we have the sum, too much just doesn't make that much sense anymore, right? You would in the production process you would approach that in a different way. But I use a lot, or very often I use the sum and I jam it through one pedal, because also what it does.
So you're actually recording this for your productions as one track?
Sometimes I do that because if I would have them individually out and recorded and then group them and send them out through a driver, it gives it a different feel. And I because it kind of like very, very nicely glues it together and brings it together through the sum, because already there's some kind of compression happening. And you can hear the high conga now, which gets a certain dimension. It's almost three-dimensional sounding in my ears. And you know, you have a nice cymbal, and you can play with the decays, because everything is getting pulled and like.
Yeah, it's like the sounds really interact with each other. Yeah. And can we hear the dry version again?
Yeah, I mean, you can, you know, it's a totally different story, right? It's
So obviously the stuff grooves together, but through the distortion and by everything running through the same input, you definitely glue them together and make them speak with each other a bit more.
Yeah, because you have these interacting harmonics all of a sudden that weren't there before, and again, like this, you know, and having a bit more of the decay of the 808. You have to be, you know, be a bit, you have to find the sweet spot, because it might be too much. Again, that's too much. That might be, for my taste, a little bit too little. So somewhere here.
So for the producers out there, an interesting tip that would follow from that is to also maybe consider using distortion on the master bus or on sends and turns to create harmonics that all of the stuff share, right? To basically glue everything a bit together, even if it's in a more subtle way.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's this kind of like, sidechain drive, what I sometimes do to have the original signal, because obviously there's a lot of low end is missing because of what the drive does. But you can find ways to not lose that or EQ it at the very end. But that is up to taste. But what I think brings a lot of magic with it is that you use the master out, or the sum of the machine into the drive. That works perfectly.
All right, shall we move on to the next one?
I think we should move to the
distortion.
MXR. No, let's do the distortion, because I think the perception is that the drive is the least brutal, and now we're getting to the perhaps, let's see, more brutal distortion. Let's see, let's go a bit lower in the, and there we have it now. So that is our 808
This
plain.
All right.
That is with the MXR, but no distortion yet.
Because it just comes when we.
And we turn it. But you hear.
Now we hear an additional kind of noise, like almost like a.
What we hear here in my ears is that it's much more tighter. Something you might not have expected compared to the drive, the blues
Yeah, it feels like it stops more suddenly. All of the hits, they are not as much dragged out as they've been here, I think.
Yeah, because
we have this additional attack on the kick drum, especially, I think. This very high, sharp attack.
let's just listen to the plain bass drum. You have this like nice. You get that like this transient that is getting like a bit like attenuated and like. I would still have expected the distortion to be more radical, more brutal than the driver. But that would be perhaps more one of an aesthetic that fits and allows space for other instruments, right? Whereas the blues driver,
filling out the whole spectrum.
Yeah, I think it would have been difficult to fit in something on top of that, or you might have in the creative process you might have started with the synthesizer first and then add the driver by taste, where. And we're already here at the maximum of but it allows still space, but it adds the nice harmonics and the distortion to the signal. And again, the conga. The conga is very often for me. Let's see what the drive or the distortion or the fuzz does to the conga, because. Also the cymbal. It's much more. It's much more delicate and not that brutal than the driver. What it did to the cymbal. And it's still.
Yeah, I feel like this one is harder on the kick than the one before, but softer on everything else.
Yeah. I think that's how you could describe it. It doesn't scream that much, perhaps. It's a more round, more like even, equal distortion. Yet do everything. Get a very nice hair.
Yeah, for sure.
Also the snare. It gets it. Whereas. And like everything together, you have the kick, then you have the hits of the snare, and with a clap, and everything then ends up in the circuitry of the drive, and it gives it this. It's like having a nice compressor on the master bus. It's just putting everything in place, and it places the instruments in its own individual frequency range. And that is also something. This pedal is of pretty good quality, so it's not that noisy. So it doesn't add too much noise to the signal itself. So it's like it's a pretty useful tool in the recording process, and the outcome. The recorded audio is of a pretty dope quality.
All right, moving on to the last one, which also seems to have a lot more control.
The Friedman, the Phosphine. First of all, it's a valve-driven fuzz, and it has a little EQ section. So this is the dry, and we're right now just listening again to the clap and the kick. And you can already hear.
This is, for example, right now a lot more colors in the mid-range.
Yeah. That's why that EQ section is very handy to tame a bit.
Okay, let me play around a bit.
I mean, if we add the snare now, you will have.
Yeah.
It steals a lot of the lower. Gets very muddy. I think you really have
regular version, but I think it's most interesting when you turn up the highest.
Yeah, you have to balance it out, because otherwise, and also but we did not really apply
the fuzz. Aha.
So I would put a little bit less space, but I mean, you can hear what it does. That's. Especially with drums, because the kick drum is giving in, like putting so much power in the signal, that kind of like everything is according to the kick drum. So perhaps something like that. And again, the conga check.
It sounds completely different.
I would say it's the most radical of the three pedals.
Yeah.
But then there is something that is, there's a feature with the Phosphine, and it's called Rage.
Okay. Oh yes.
Almost like a screaming voice.
Absolutely. So this is definitely the most radical. I want to do that move as well. So it also doesn't click. You just have to hold it. That's amazing. Yeah, sick.
So that is, and especially on the.
And is the Rage influenced by the fuzz button? So is the Rage more aggressive the more fuzz I give? Or? Yeah, there's a subtle.
There you have your punk attitude. Again, with the kick, as soon as the kick comes in, you have to have it in a setting where I think again everything is according to the kick drum, because otherwise, I mean, I would even like in the fuzz, I would make it a shorter kick, not too much of the K.
What's your favorite?
It's hard to tell, because they all do something different in a way. I mean, if I would like it more extreme and more harsh, I would tend to use the Phosphine. Yesterday I had a little session with the Blues Driver, and it was a lot of fun, because it also has this kind of screaming attitude. I think it would perfectly fit on a 303 or on a 101. The MXR is definitely one of the. It's pretty tight and pretty solid. Perhaps the pedal that is the roundest by its appearance. The Phosphine. I mean, you can destroy things with the Phosphine a lot, which I really like. It's difficult to tell. There is no. I mean,
depends on the application.
It depends on what you want to do, and that's how I like to mangle my kick drums or my whole drum kit in this case.
All right, then thanks for sharing your obsession with distortion. Definitely an interesting look, because as you said, you rarely hear them compared for electronic music contexts.
Yeah, if you have any further questions, you at home at watching the video, hit us up in the comments, and we're trying to solve and trying to answer a few questions. maybe not only according to the pedals, but even other.
If you have any questions, let us know. And apart from that, thanks for tuning in. See you next time. Peace out.